Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, Genesis here. Have you ever looked at your moon drop area and think to yourself, what if I can get exactly the same kind of tuning but with better technical performance? So if you have been wondering the same thing, then you're in luck. Today we're going to talk about a $570 earphones from AuR Audio, Aurora. So this earphone has two dynamic drivers handling the bass, four balanced armature driver handling the mid-range, and two balanced armature driver dealing with the treble. So the Aurora unit that I have here is based on a tour arranged by AuR Audio for Australia. So it didn't come with any packaging. What I have is a carrying case, IMs themselves, a stock cable, and some ear tips. The overall sonic presentation of Aurora can be described as smooth, slightly warm, and easygoing without any harshness or sibilance. So if you look at the frequency response, the best way to describe it is think of the whole frequency response as having a very slight tilt from the bass to the mid-range to the treble. So the bass of Aurora has a strong emphasis in the sub-bass region, and then from the sub-bass, the bass will gradually glide or mesh into the mid-range, just slightly coloring the lower mid-range, just very slightly. So the amount of warmth in the presentation of Aurora is way different from something you can expect from, say, the Campfire Audio Andromeda. It's very thick and warm, dense mid-range. It's not the same, it's just slightly warm. And because of that tuning of the bass, you would find that the bass is not separate from the mid-range, like what you would expect from a usual neutral with bass boost IEM. But the bass is more meshed into the mid-range. So on one hand, you wouldn't have a very strong, very distinct and dynamic sounding bass, because the bass blends into the mid-range. But at the same time, the bass feels natural, and the quality and the resolution in the bass is very good. So you can hear with Aurora, even though the attack is not very snappy, but it's still impactful. You can feel the physical sensation of the bass, and the bass note is relatively crisp, clean, but the strength is in the decay of the bass. So, for example, when you listen to the bass guitar, with Aurora, it is very easy to follow individual notes of the bass guitar, and the notes have texture and details that is not usually available when you listen to IEM with balanced armature bass, or even the usual dynamic driver bass that is not very resolving or very high quality. So I really like the bass of Aurora. The mid-range is also very nice because, like I mentioned, it's just slightly color, but the rest of the mid-range is totally correct. The upper mid-range is properly boosted, so you wouldn't have to worry about any unusual timbre or any unusual honkiness or that sort of nastiness that you can find in the mid-range if the ear gain is not done properly. But at the same time, the upper mid-range, the ear gain, is not pushed as high as usual, as you would expect from a Harman-inspired IEMs. So there would be no shoutiness or no harshness in the vocal, even when you listen to brighter and shoutier vocals. For example, some tracks in the album Equals by Ed Sheeran. In fact, I would say the mid-range is the strength of Aurora, especially in the way it presents vocal music. It is not that the voice is bright and in your face, but there's just some richness to the vocals, both male and female vocal, that make the music more, dare I say, more musical. So after the upper mid-range, around 3 to 4 kHz, Aurora start to roll off. So that means there wouldn't be a lot of presence around 5-6 kilohertz, so not a lot of sharpness. And then the 8 kilohertz region, where cymbals, hi-hats, chimes, that sort of high-pitched instrument exist, that region is also pulled down. So the effect is you would have almost no sibilance. Even if the track is kind of sibilant, this IM would try to smoothen everything, make everything smooth and easygoing. Again, contributing to the nice and easy and smooth vocal presentation. The only part in the treble presentation of Aurora that I think could be improved is in terms of the upper treble response. I think it is a little bit too subdued, so that kind of tuning would have negative impact on the perceived technical performance of Aurora in terms of the precision of the imaging, the positioning of the instrument on the soundstage, and also in terms of the micro details retrieval that this IM can do. Now let's talk about the technical performance. In terms of resolution, Aurora actually does a very good job in terms of especially in the mid-range. So the mid-range of this IM have good separation between different voice and instruments, unless the music is very dense. So for example, when I listen to a cello concerto with a lot of energy going on in the lower mid-range and upper bass, because we have the cello, we have the orchestra, we also have cello and bass, so all of that energy condensing together would make the whole concerto feels a little bit more, I can say, a little bit congested. It's a bit harder to follow those instruments when the whole range is dense. But for example, when I listen to a track by pentatonics, for example Jolene, it's very easy to pinpoint directly and follow individual voice, even the voice that I put on the way to the side of the stage. Not only I can follow, but I can hear the details in those voices. So the mid-range separation and also details is good. However, because of the more subdued upper mid-range, there are some details, some micro details that Aurora wouldn't review. For example, when I listen to violin partita, so it's just one violin solo in a concert hall. So with this IM, I wouldn't hear the sound of the violin bouncing against the concert hall. The reverberation is not very strong, it's not as present as I would expect. So the sense of space is more reduced. And at the same time, when I pay a lot of attention to the string of the violin, there's also less nuance and details, like some smaller details that doesn't pop out, mostly because everything is more smoothened. In terms of soundstage and imaging, the overall theme of smooth and easygoing also translates to this area. So the overall size of the soundstage doesn't feel very large, but at the same time it doesn't feel too congested because of the strong, clear, relatively clear separation between different voice and instrument. As I mentioned, unless you listen to some very dense with a lot of energy in the lower end music. At the same time, you wouldn't be able to hear more of the sense of space, the ambience, like the sound of the reverberation of the instrument around the stage that make the background layer of the soundstage. So that sort of sound doesn't come through very clearly, so this IM doesn't make the soundstage feel large and spacious. In terms of gaming, I find that Aurora is acceptable. I can feel the overall direction where the sound comes from, but it's not like laser focus, and it's a little bit hard to have, but it doesn't give you that sense of laser focus positioning or at the distance, and it does better side to side rather than front to back. Now let's talk about some comparison. The first comparison is of course with the Moondrop area. So in terms of the tonality, I would say they are very, very similar. When I listen to one of my track, the overall sensation, overall presentation of the sound is similar. It's warm, it's smooth, it's correct, it's easy to listen to. But Aurora has significantly more technical performance on aspect. Everything is more pinpoint, more separate, more correct. It's easy to identify and separate on the instrument. And when you zoom into those instruments, you hear much more details, more things to listen to. So of course it has to be. Another comparison is with the moon drop variation. So I think Aurora and variations retails at roughly the same price. So when you put these IAMs on, immediately you notice the difference in the tonality. Aurora is more dense, easy, smooth, easygoing sound. Variation is very clean and open and crisp, more energetic, I would say. So you have more bass, very lean mid-range, and then a lot of upper mid-range. So everything is bright and clear. So in terms of tonality, I think it's up to you. You decide which kind of presentation you like, energetic and clean, or something smooth, easier going. So in terms of the technical performance, I would say they are mostly on the same level. The lean presentation of the variation would give it the sense, would give the illusion that variation is more separate and everything is more spread out. But when you actually zoom into those instruments and vocals, you see that the amount of details are roughly the same. So not much to compare. The positioning of the instrument, I think the variation is just a little bit better. But again, it's not like day and night different. Another comparison that I was curious about is between Aurora and Campfire Audio Andromeda 2020. So this IM is somewhat divisive in terms of whether it is resolving or not resolving, technical or not technical. To me, after I have experienced and tried with a lot of different earphones, I found that this IM is deceptively technical. So because it has a lot of energy and dense in the lower mid-range, so you would, at the first listening, everything just feels to mesh together more. So it's kind of like the same situation with Aurora. But when you actually when you sit down and you listen, and then you realize it's very easy to pinpoint and follow individual instrument and vocal on the stage. And then you zoom into them, you actually feel that there's a lot more detail and texture. Another strand of Andromeda is the sense of space. That last layer, the background of the soundstage, the reverberation, the sense of space. This is why this IM is known to be holographic. So, how about the Aurora? Aurora, I would say the tonality is still warm, but I think the tonality of Aurora is more pleasing because Aurora is warmer, but at the same time not warmer. Aurora is warm, but at the same time, it is correct. Andromeda is obviously thicker and denser, and they try to make the sound more colored, but at the same time, it's not very natural, very neutral. But in terms of the technical performance, I would say the resolution of Andromeda is still at least full step ahead in the direct A/B comparison. Just easier to pinpoint, more nuance and texture. And the difference between the staging and the sense of space, there's no comparison because the Aurora deliberately roll off the upper mid-range, when the Andromeda has pretty strong treble extension. The last comparison is with something new, something called the AuR Performance A. So similarly to Aurora, the PA is also an A driver IEMs, but I think it retails around $370, so quite a bit cheaper. And AuR have 7 balanced armature and only 1 dynamic driver, so the bass configuration is more normal comparing to the fancier arrangement in the Aurora. So in terms of the bass, I would say Aurora has an edge against the P8 in terms of just the overall niceness of the bass. The bass of Aurora is more natural, more at the same time more impactful and more resolving. Even though the PA is not bad in terms of the bass, but the detail and the decay is not the same. The mid-range is where these IM differ. So the Aurora is warm and more smooth, more easygoing. The AuR is more neutral, more linear. In fact, this IM also have a dip around 250 Hz to separate the bass from the mid-range. So you will feel the mid-range sometimes can feel a little bit thinner, but that doesn't exist on Aurora. So just say in terms of, if you want a more reference kind of mid-range, then the P8. But if you want more musical, more smooth presentation, more pleasing presentation, I think Aurora. In terms of the technical performance, this is where it gets interesting. So if you have seen any reviews of the PA, you know this IM has very strong treble extension. So immediately at that point, you guess where this would go. So PA has a stronger sense of details. So when I listen to like a violin solo, I just zoom in on the violin, PA extract just a little bit extra details, a little bit smaller nuance in the string comparing to the Aurora. And because of the upper treble, the sense of space, the reverberation of the sound around the head is also stronger with the P8. So I would say just in terms of the sheer technical performance, PA is stronger. But in overall niceness of the sound, again, it depends on you. I would say if you listen primarily to vocal music, maybe Aurora is a little bit more pleasing just because the way it presents the mid-range. Conclusion time. I think Aurora is a special IEM because that smooth and warm and easygoing presentation is not easy to come by. And especially when we combine that kind of presentation with the decent enough technical performance, especially in the bass and in the mid-range region. Of course, I wish for more energy in upper treble so that I can have more micro details, more space, more accurate placement, more precise placement of instruments. But at the same time, I think it's more about my preference rather than that is a weakness of this IM. Because I think if they implement those change, this IM wouldn't be Aurora. So, should I get this IM? If you listen primarily to vocal music or you listen to something not very dense, something that doesn't require like a pinpoint precise positioning of the instrument, if you're not listening for details and you just sit back, enjoy and relax, and this is a good IM to consider. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.